Hello, everybody. It's my pleasure today to welcome Patrice Latin for an inspiring keynote on entitled End-to-End Transformative Journey in AI. So you will talk about moving from process automation and little AI to smart automation and enterprise-level artificial intelligence. And during the talk, you will navigate along a 3-year roadmap from single use case to hundreds, from one model to machine learning engineering, from a risk framework to trusted AI at scale. That will be passionating. But Patrice, we are friends, but you are partner at EY and you lead the data and analytics consulting service for financial services in Belgium. You have gained over 20 years of advisory experience in financial services and other industries in the field of enterprise management, business analytics, data science, artificial intelligence, and robotics. So you are also a lecturer at Solvay Brussels Schools of Economics and Management in executive education on financial market innovation and strategy and business analytics. You pay there to the students the artificial intelligence courses. You hold a PhD in applied machine learning and from Iridia at ULB, and it's a real pleasure to welcome you today, and I let you the floor.
Thank you, Nathaniel. That's my pleasure to be with you today. So thank you for introducing me. So today in this session, I will give a view, my view, I would say, on how we could implement artificial intelligence in quite large organizations and trying to see how an end-to-end transformative journey looks like. So first of all, we start with a few point of views, a few questions that many companies in Belgium are addressing and questioning in the evolution, the fast evolution of AI today. Where do we stand? And first question is, has AI lived up to its billing so far? So there was a lot of hype, as you know, in AI, but actually what we say is that potential opportunities and benefits are clearly underhyped. We're still at the very early stage still. And there's a lot of noise regarding AI on the good AI and what we see as consumers provided by the tech giants. But still, we see in organizations in Belgium a lack of in-depth discussion and analysis of how it's going to transform businesses. So there's, as most of you probably know, a lot of trials, a lot of errors after these trials, but how really being capable to transform the organizations towards a very transformative journey using AI. Are there any functions, sectors that are utilizing AI more effectively than others? That's a question that many of my clients are asking to see whether I am a leader in AI in my business or am I lagging behind. Typically, we see that, and I think it has been already a lot of discussions in this European AI Week about healthcare dominating a lot for the good of AI. But what about other industries? For instance, I'm currently working in financial services. Banks and insurers have been using data for a long time, but the adoption of AI still is progressing quite well and meeting first barriers in this. Marketing, financial crime are typically the first sectors that are addressed. In other organizations, retail, media, high tech, or even manufacturing, also what we see that we are only in the early stage. After fin crime, really combating, fighting financial crime or fraud, typically all these risks, or addressing a better experience to customers. We see also a lot of AI applied in operations, in the back office of organizations, in finance, in HR, or simply as managing things, managing documents, managing a lot of paperwork, for instance, to automate. That is the key word in where AI is really a key enabler. Many barriers, because organizations want to move quickly using AI, this new technology. So barriers is mainly about data, how to go beyond the barrier of bad data or lack of data or lack of data understanding, but also what can we do with the data to build AI systems, to build a machine learning model with the regulation being regulatory compliant with GDPR typically. The lack of sponsorship, lack of trust of the community that is willing to adopt AI because of the potential risk or the unknown or the lack of knowledge of understanding what is the game change, especially when it is about replacing possibly the job or the work of a collaborator or a team. And then there's the lack of talents. That is another barrier. Beyond understanding what is about AI is really being capable to do it, because some parts are pretty technical, and understanding also the ecosystem of all the possible technologies that are moving very fast. We typically see the life cycle of AI moving very fast from a few months, a quarter. There's already a new software, new startups, new frameworks, programming frameworks, new ideas, new possibilities. So that's a very fast world. The risks are also something that is very important for the business to consider in order to address this end-to-end transformative journey. The risk in the design, how do I design my AI product to solve my business problem? My data risks, the fact that the data, and we will come back to that, the data change a lot, and especially with the data that I own in a kind of development environment, in a sandbox, are potentially or very likely different from what we see in production. The algorithms themselves, the risk of algorithms not really doing what we expect them to do, or mastering complexity of algorithm architectures. We think about deep learning architectures. There's a risk of managing these algorithms or simply the versions of the underlying APIs running these algorithms to learn from the data is at risk. And then the performance of AI overall is an additional risk as well, and only the accuracy of what AI is supposed to do, but also the robustness against potential changes in the data, generalization capabilities, but also the bias, the fairness, the transparency, all these trust elements or attributes that you would like to address to be sure that what we do is not derailing the organization or not risking to impact the reputation of the organization. Implementing an end-to-end transformative journey can be addressed two ways, basically, top-down or bottom-up. That's a simplistic approach that we think of naturally. Looking on the top-down, pre-examining the business to be capable to automate more, to increase revenue, to reduce costs. I have a business problem, how technology can help, or vice versa with the bottom-up. AI is a new technology, but when you dig into the detail, there's many different components, different tools, different methods, which one I master, and I can replicate the mastering of one component of AI technology to many other business use cases. That's so both approaches are actually very valid, and what I see is typically combining top-down and bottom-up approaches. Now, embedding AI in the business is really the key differentiator. We're not anymore like 10, 20 years ago, mainly capable to address list of probabilities that my client will churn, list of potential fraudsters, etc. But really being capable to ingest, to embed, to nest the AI system, the AI product inside the business application. What is the endpoint application of AI, and how to integrate that model in the real world of a business application so that it's in the fingerprint of the human, the user, the end user, being a citizen, being a collaborator within the organization, within the company. That is the key challenge as well. And that will make the difference to be capable to automate and to do things differently. I've already addressed the risks, so the challenge of addressing increased transparency, trust, but also not necessarily creating an overhead of cost. We used to implement data mining, data science, predictive modeling, things that looks okay, very well mastered, but it looks to many organizations that there's many other things to do nowadays to be not only compliant with some regulatory pressures, but also to be sure that we do the right things until the end. And once it's in the end in production, still being capable to explain what's happening, and especially when the system deviates from what we would expect it to do. So all these key questions are typically addressed at the beginning, at the middle, and still at the end of the transformative journey in AI, because actually there's no real end, I would say. As we will see, I will try to explain in the next slides, there's really cycles and cycles about the renewal of the AI implementation within organizations. So I will maybe minimize this or put it apart. So the key shift that we've seen these last years is clearly moving from POCs, from labs, from trials and errors to massive scale of AI in production. Nevertheless, what we hear, what we read by analysts or very famous organizations surveying companies these last 3-4 years, is that it was still a slow process. 85% of AI projects will not deliver with super high quality or will be very successful, what was predicting Gartner. A lot of erroneous outcomes due to bias in data or misunderstanding of algorithms and lacking of expertise of development teams. 48% was of CIOs were betting apparently that AI will be deployed by the end of 2020. I'm not so sure that such a percentage is actually correct nowadays. I would tend to say that it's lower still nowadays when I see the adoption of true AI and say, okay, what is true adoption of AI? I would say that you have already like 10, 20, 50 different models running in production every day. And that's what we see in large organizations or smaller organizations when really AI is becoming more and more commodity and very well mastered. I'm not sure we are there nowadays in Belgium, or at least in very few organizations. 70% of enterprises are clearly prioritizing AI machine learning. We've seen a big increase in budgets last years. And that's a reality not only in US by Forbes or in the world, but clearly in Belgium, we see really an appetite to do AI, thanks to organizations like AI for Belgium, and creating a lot of awareness, a lot of messages and communications to understand that yes, it's really something that is now happening and not for the future, even in Belgium, within in one or another region, even in specific industries, this is really everywhere. A very recent survey made by the AI Forum and published 1 month ago, if I'm not mistaken, said that still only 11% of 650 different businesses, departments, or business managers said that they have deployed multiple AI capabilities in their organization. And 39% of the same group, survey group, were not currently using or considering AI. So I was personally pretty surprised by that, but these results were about specific businesses, specific departments like HR, finance, IT, and not the most typical ones like marketing or risk or specific operational departments. So we're not there yet to move to massive scale in production, although large organizations working in financial services are really accelerating a lot and wondering why, how to be successful in meeting end-to-end this end-to-end journey. So I will tell one story, but not pointing any organization or any company in Belgium, but a few of them have actually realized AI in their organization, although it's not finished for none of the ones I have in mind. But I will try to explain a bit how they've addressed their agenda, how they could actually accelerate any given moment in time. And actually, the first thing they wanted to address was quite trivial. Selling the right product in the right way at the right price was typically the mindset, the vision of organizations, a very high level in the organization, and especially with the C-level. And then we need to address all the businesses, all departments, all activities within the organization. That was also one typical goal. And so meeting IT, HR, but not IT for enabling AI, but also trying to using AI to solve IT problems as well. The story started, or the journey started with the strategy, obviously, focusing, these organizations were focusing on data management, reporting, business intelligence, and very siloed data science, first AI models, experimenting simple machine learning models, not yet deep learning, natural language processing, computer vision, anyhow. So really early stage. And the EXCO involvement was key at that very first step. And then second step was moving to the organization setup. There were in organizations many different maturities in the organization. Marketing, fraud, risk typically were moving quite well. Marketing publishing a lot of models with their own technology setup, their own environment. Again, a different environment for the fraud team, different environment for the risk team, using different software, different commercial software or open source software, different type of databases, and different even sources of data as well. Different investments, no sharing of investments, no synergies between departments. And so it was time to get organized and to possibly centralize capabilities, investments, talents within one single team, slowly, but certainly. It was really a key step, still being capable to address the focus, the business focus, and the compliance questions. Then in terms of process, was really being capable to address how to get organized, how to list what was already achieved, and being capable to do more. Who will do what when you start gathering people together, because you have data scientists in marketing, some data scientists in fraud, or in security, or in risk, or in operations. Gathering people needs roles and responsibilities better addressed, but also the way you can actually start developing a project or implementing or coding, and then what do you do to move to production? But my target environment is not yet ready. So we need to move to the data infrastructure world. We really give the computing power to these teams, moving from little AI at small scale with that could, I would say, run on a laptop, on a typical laptop, and being disconnected from the backend infrastructure of the organization, to really or really strong computing power and storage capabilities, typically leveraging the cloud, private or public, but really addressing this and setting that up was an important next step. Then what about the tools? How do you code? Is it in a Python notebook, or do I buy a commercial software? How complete is this commercial software? Would it be capable to address my documents and being able to perform OCR and then extracting named entities on my documents? Am I capable to address voice data, speech data, transcripting that in text? Am I capable to run optimization algorithms using my Python frameworks or my SAS or IBM or Microsoft? I don't want to make any advertisement here for any company, but that's typically the ecosystem of typical big players. But as of course, there's a lot of more smaller players or even dedicated players, dedicated for one single particular problem in marketing or in fraud or in financial crime, typically. So many different choices. And then the next choice is integrating all this new infrastructure and platforms into the IT landscape of applications and being capable to address or to be compliant with the current IT governance, or make very clear that managing AI or governing AI is different from the IT. So that is also a very important step, together with ensuring security questions, privacy, legal questions, especially when you combine client data or when you address transactions of payments. Typically, you need to you could potentially load a lot of data very quickly and make error. So the key message there was, when moving at that stage, was not to overshoot. That is a very important step. The cycle is not totally correct. I put on a row here, but what happened in the organization I had in mind is they moved very quickly again to the process and organization again. So the data were available, and data platforms were accessible, computing power, the choices of going open source or commercial software. But then it was time to have a vision, to establish the mission statement of the organization. So it was a little part of strategy, but also to address quality and risk in the organization. What is quality for an AI system? What is the risk that had to be addressed? And these elements of the cycle, running into this journey, was really to stay pragmatic and having a very good clarity how to address the realization and the portfolio of different use cases. Moving to the organization, of course, these organizations were moving agile. What is agile in a normal setup? In the IT software engineering, what is different from software engineering, software development, to AI development lifecycle? Moving from DevOps, typically, capabilities and organizations and processes, to MLOps, machine learning operations, where actually the code and the data potentially change. And there's a continuous dynamic as well to move in production and taking care about the code that is not fixed and rigid, but really learning from the data. Introduce a new paradigm as well for an IT to get organized properly and being capable to address the release of the AI systems properly. So, as you could imagine, at that stage, many different elements were ready. and the AI was already moving, not necessarily running, but it was moving or walking very well. So it was time to reinvent and to accelerate, and therefore to initiate again a new strategy exercise, and being sure that all business stakeholders were on the page of what was happening on different little teams all around the organizations, and that the business strategy of the organization was aligned with the AI implementations of different use cases that were a bit in siloed or a bit still everywhere, all over the place in the organization. So creating this awareness at a very high level in the organization, this making an AI strategy exercise, being capable to measure how to generate the impact in the organization, to be sure that you make the right priorities, the right choice, big bets, and then the low-hanging fruits, making sure that the investments increase was validated and agreed in the whole organization. And then bringing the capability to measure this business value. That is still something that is not so obvious in many organizations. Being capable to measure value means that you invest first in human capabilities, in training people, in putting in place data platforms, AI platforms, commercial software. There's a cost of compute and many other costs. But what is really the return on these investments? And how can I evaluate this properly so that I know in 2, 3, 5 years how the benefits will really be highlighted? So then once you set up this strategy again, then you're okay to accelerate, and then you start the full wheel again to see whether your organization is up and running and ready to accelerate, upscaling the organization, retraining people, and being capable to address again new data problems, moving from structured data that are in relational databases, possibly accelerating the way to extract text data, emails, documents, and then moving to voice, moving to images, to videos, to edge AI, possibly is the next stage that we see in these organizations in Belgium already, but still with a journey in front of them of 3 years minimum, with a certainty that AI is now and AI will continue for a long time, but still managing what happens on the field, and still with a lot of communication to the top. So that is a bit the end-to-end transformative journey at level 1. So at level 1, meaning at management level, and going down to the implementation. Let's zoom a little bit in the technical implementation, things that are very common, very well known for years, but where recently, these last years, have been complemented by additional aspects to be sure that everything is under control. And what we see here is a review or a revamp of the traditional AI development lifecycle, where you have your business problem, business understanding, problem understanding, the data understanding, so the so-called CRISP DM revamped, and where you clearly ask specific questions, how to address the AI strategy, as I've just said. How do you invest? What is your ambition? How can I do that? Should I buy? Should I make things? And again, a question that was addressed this morning by a very important chief data officer in Belgium. What will I do if my project fails? Do I have a plan B? How do I organize the transition? And then the AI system itself, how will it work? How does it work? Does it harm, to some extent, my citizens, my consumers, my customers, my employees? Is it robust in case of data changes, in terms of obsolescence of some frameworks or some IT processes? Is it safe? And how will it be adopted? Because in the end, number one is adoption of the life cycle. And so what we enriched in this technical implementation is 2 levels. is firstly, and that's why we call it the Trusted AI Framework, it is there for at least 3 years, is to complement the technical life cycle by firstly 3 principles. The first, purposeful design, making sure that what you design is for the right purpose. Then the agile governance, so being sure that you govern the risks that are potentially lying from the very beginning of an idea that might impact the reputation of the organization, down to the really extreme of a model that is running in production for a long time, and something happens and you don't know anymore what's happening. And then the vigilant that calls as well the vigilant supervision, meaning the fact that you're still in control, the human is in the loop. And this aspect of AI, although the paradigm is to automate and to potentially mimic the human senses and the human capabilities in executing, in reading, in viewing, in feeling. But in the end, we see clearly the human is still in the loop. Fortunately, I would like to say, not necessarily that actually nothing is totally automated, but the human could be totally automated end to end, but still the human is there to say, yeah, okay, but is the AI capable to recognize these digits? Is the AI capable to recognize a white or a black face? Is AI capable to recognize the last type of emails in my spam filters? Is it phishing or not? So all these little questions that need expertise still need to address. And additionally to that, we need data and to feed the algorithms, the trained algorithms, to retrain them, and data are lacking. So and especially label data. When you have a document, you expect this document to be an invoice, but are you sure that this is the VAT number in the left, the upper left corner? Are you sure this is a date in the bottom right corner? Are you sure this is the signature or the logo of the company? Are you sure about the total amount that is on the bottom of the document? Because still, what we see from very famous benchmarks in handwritten text recognition, 17 digits out of 10,000 examples were badly classified, still today with the best ever algorithms. So these doubts that reside in the fact that AI is uncertain, is probabilistic, you need to address them with vigilance, and that's why these principles are in place. And then around what I've mentioned already, the data risk, algorithmic risks, performance risk, and design risks are addressed. And that's why we move then to the next slide to understand really these challenges of trusted AI. So I'm looking at the watch, and I think it's still okay. So challenges in trusted AI. Again, our goal with end-to-end transformative journey is to perform massive scale AI in production. That is really what every company is willing to perform. But there's probably, if you don't manage AI properly, of course, it can be a massive failure in production. And there's a lot of change and differences with traditional software, traditional products, where the code is explicit, where the answers, when you have a data, the answer is crisp, it's deterministic, while in AI, in machine learning especially, there's a stochastic output. There's a probability that is output from the input data going through the algorithms, and that makes a very important difference. And this difference, as I said, from DevOps to MLOps is already something, but already when you are in production, AI is silent. And that is a behavior that is a bit surprising. Typically, let's say Amazon is running very well. You are connected to Amazon software, web pages, etc. But strangely enough, the recommendation that the tool would do to you is completely weird, and you don't know. But nobody noticed. You have millions of consumers or visitors on the Amazon webpage or website, and nobody noticed really that actually it's recommending things that are totally inappropriate. The same with the Gmail filters or the Google text extension or text recognition. It has stories like that where silently AI was failing to some extent, and so it was silent for a long moment, and then suddenly it exploded. It harmed. Potentially, harm is maybe a strong word, but at least it impacted the reputation of these organizations, firstly, but also potentially creating misery in some purchasing behavior, in some reaction of the people, or some unethical situations. And that's what we want to avoid and that is a big challenge, but still not really, I mean, trying to find the right balance. Should I really be very conservative, very protecting, and choose applying the Occam razor? I still stick to my simple model. It's good enough. I'm in control. It's transparent. I can explain what happens, etc. Or yeah, I'm really willing to explore these famous deep learning models, or even no need for deep learning, but more sophisticated algorithms that I don't really understand how it works. But potentially, if data change, if data are better in production or worse in production, you have the two modes. It can entail a lot of impacts in the organization or potentially the end users. So that's why all this information, all these of challenges are important to address along the life cycle. And that's the trust implementation, how to implement trust in AI. And you have here different principles and the five key elements that we at EY believe that are the key, the five key principles or attributes, or rather attributes than principles of trust. Unbiased, so the bias in the data, resilience. How resilient am I to typically cyber attacks or specific shocks in the AI system as a whole, the explainability, the transparency, and then the performance being accurate, robust, but also performance in the sense that I'm fast, and with this fast and this speed capability, am I not going too fast? Just put here a very recent book picture of a book, and I gave the source here about the different bias. There's a lot of bias in the data. We tend to say in many readings that the algorithms are biased, the algorithms are doing things that are not very good. This book also mentioned that, yeah, there are a bias in the algorithms themselves, in the way the human reviews the algorithms, or even the AI system as a whole. So really the algorithm trained on data, making the model, making possibly the system if you have multiple ones together. So the human review is also biased. So these three elements should be very well balanced in how to address bias in the AI system, so that you can really see how the AI system behaves with the environment. If you see a robot, the robot or the Pac-Man, for instance, how Pac-Man behaves in the maze to avoid the phantoms, but still having the food he's running after. And these situation here that is very simple in a game. How do you address the fact that potentially in a real world situation, in a real world application, the action that is made by the perception of the AI system from its environment, how can it respond properly and in an unbiased way? So that is a very interesting reading about the way performance as a more global terminology is addressed with explainable AI. So the question at this stage is, okay, there's a lot of questions, a lot of challenges, and how actually to address the trusted AI. There's a lot about the organization, about the accountability. We've seen that in the beginning of the slide, that there's a big concern about how to get properly organized, trained, how to put processes in place, not to over-regulate the problems, not over-engineer the risk. Still, AI is there for good things, and that's the goal of most, if not, most organizations doing AI for good reasons. But still, managing risk is important. How is, on one hand, on the defensive aspect, being sure that the regulator, if you're working in a regulated environment like bank or healthcare, typically sectors need to prove that what you do is correct. But there's no major difference with what is necessary to prove to a regulator on an IT questions. It's additional elements. And on the other side, you probably have an more offensive attitude regarding the trust. I want my AI to be trustworthy so that I can accelerate, and I'm in control, and I can accelerate the adoption of AI, and I can do more. And that's really the duo of the how. And it's not about only accountability and about responsibility in people, although it's at every level. There's possibly also the use of technology. And how do you statistically measure that your system is biased? What about fairness? What about quality of your system? And then moving end to end to this life cycle. Again, we're thinking about the journey as a whole, and then inside that journey, you have the development of use cases for a given AI system. So it's end-to-end process from the first very little idea to the monitoring. And this monitoring aspect, the monitoring of the AI system, is key to be capable to measure what's happening, because that's really the gateway once you move to production, that it's there. You can't go back so easily, and it could be too late already. So you need to be in control at that stage. And that's why we have a lot of focus nowadays, and many organizations have a lot of focus in the monitoring of AI system. And it's not straightforward, it's not obvious. There's, of course, the monitoring of the infrastructure, the computing power. Is AI capable to run properly with the decent service level agreements, with the right versions of the tools, of the frameworks, of the data and everything? But of course, data change. Data is potentially changing because that's the change of the business, because sometimes the IT or some departments have changed the logic, the concepts, and you need to be capable in a very early way to be informed about these changes and the impact on your AI systems. And there's AI for AI on that. So it's not always AI, but at least solid statistics, and the capability to at least monitor, so visualize what's happening along the timeline, and measuring the data drift, the different data drifts. There's not only one, there's multiple concepts around that, about the different potential drift in your data or changes in your data, and how do you monitor? And the next step is clearly, how am I capable to be alerted before it happens? How can I anticipate that the AI system will behave differently than expected? So here you have an example of a visualization. It's not the best visualization ever, but of course the KPI inside are very important, where you need to be capable to challenge your AI system by a challenger AI model, a simpler one typically, or some statistical techniques that can, using some small data and a simpler system, can really spot potentially deviations in what's happening. Then when you are already at the stage of monitoring an AI system, of course you have made at least one full cycle and all the multiple cycles in your transformative journey. You have implemented already one or two models, and you have implemented as well measures to manage risks around these AI systems. And the situation increases because you have 1, 2, 3 models in production. And the goal is that you can do that at scale. And that's why you need to multiply. And what we see, at least, organizations to wonder how to do AI at scale, because it's not only 2 or 3 models in production, could quickly become 50, 100, or even more, depending on the business. And so you multiply all these cycles by the number of models that you would like to move to production. And that's why I said it was a massive scaling of AI in production. And then again, technology can help. And that's ML ops and all these concepts that are closely follow up, but also adding the human in the loop, adding the capability to annotate data better, and not only cycling around the model and to say, okay, I have new data, so I need to retrain my model, and then I need to evaluate the error of my model and all the risk around. But now the trend is also moving to a more data-centric approach in AI, where the data change can automatically trigger the retraining of models. So that's data-centric AI is really the next stage of implementation to really be able to move to the next scale, and not only by multiplying the number of models, but also making sure that you have more data, you have more models, you have more people around, more users, and therefore you come back to this idea of I sell better services, I sell more products and in the right way and at the right price or the right for the right experience of my consumers or my customers. So in these next steps, what we've seen and what currently I see is that many organizations already are moving into this monitoring phase, to this machine learning operations at scale, being capable to monitor live models in production, being alerted. Not so many organizations are really alerted anticipatively, and then being capable to move ahead with feedback collections and retraining, automatic retraining. And I'm talking also here, of course, on potentially any kind of industries. We're not talking about the famous big tech giants or even the little smaller ones, but really all the organizations that, or many organizations that we know in the Belgian market. So, voilà. So that, I hope it was informative to how a few organizations that I know have addressed already their transformation in AI. Thank you for listening.
Thank you so much, Patrice. It was really interesting, to the point, and we need that kind of presentation much more. I think it's essential that that the business owner, the CEOs of company do understand what they can do with AI and how practically they can deploy a strategy on AI. So thank you for sharing that to us. I don't know if there are some questions in the audience. Yes, okay, some comment on the clarity of your speech. So
I don't see the comments. So it's in the chat,
but
or?
okay. So I have the channel with Alexander there. So yeah, thank you so much. I think we have recorded this session, Patrice. Do you agree that we share it with
Yeah, I agree.
the world public? Okay, thank you. And okay, I think your students should be happy to have you as a professor.
Thank you.
So
thank you
see
for
you
inviting
soon,
me,
Patrice. I don't know.
It was a great pleasure for me.
Okay.
Wish you a very nice day and a good success for the Open AI Week. It's a great
Perfect.
event.
So as you are a speaker, you are invited in the closing ceremony also tomorrow at 6 p.m.
Thank you.
Bye.
Enjoy your day. Bye-bye.